Perfect. All right. So thank you so much, Kelly, for joining me today, especially on short notice. I really do appreciate it. Um, so I have your Mivation profile up here, and it looks like they just have you down as Chief Technology and Privacy Officer. Is that a correct title for you?
Yeah, usually I tell people CTO and CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, but privacy officer's fine. It's basically all the same.
Okay. Yeah. And then if you don't mind, I'm going to jump right into my questions
Please
here.
do.
Let's see. So, can you tell me about your journey into the tech industry and what led you to Mivation?
Journey into tech industry started really young. I was trying to figure out how to cheat at video games, and I figured out I could just reprogram them by teaching myself to code. So I taught myself to code when I was about 8, 9 years old. Um, and was cheating at video games by 11 or 12. Um, Cheating at old school computer games like SimCity. Then I decided rather than manipulating someone else's world, I'd build my own. So I started building games. Um, as a teenager, I was coding and making video games. And then, that's not much for paying the bills. So I got into business software from there. But to be honest, going into tech, computers just always made sense to me, right? I was an 80s kid. Computers were new. They were kind of cool. They were still for hobbyists back then. I mean, anyone could go buy a computer and start writing basic code back then. I literally code in basic and stuff like that. And it was kind of the golden age where to have a computer meant you had to kind of know how they worked. And so I guess it was right place, right time, right? Kid with an analytical mind, they just always made sense. So I got into that. As far as getting into Mivation, um, that's a little more interesting journey. Myself and a couple other partners at a company in Prezio, we had acquired Racing Snail Inc., who was a competitor. Back about 10 years ago, we acquired controlling interest in the company. And then just as things changed and industry needs and landscape shifted, we spun what was Racing Snail back out as Mivation to be its own corporation again.
Wow. Okay. That's really awesome.
So I guess originally I actually didn't work in the company. We had a different individual running tech for the company, but he left. Just someone made him a better offer. I'm happy for him. We're still friends. And so the other partners asked me to take over as CTO, take over IT and product development. And that was 4 years ago. So I'm working on training up a couple of my direct reports to eventually take my place, to take my job.
Okay. And then when you have somebody take your job, is there something in particular that you're gonna find yourself doing or that you want to be doing?
I
Is
mean,
it still the
ideally
same area?
retiring,
Okay.
but you know, ideally retiring within the next 5 years. But well, I mean, I'll be over 50 at that point, so we'll see how it goes. Right?
Yeah.
Retirement mostly means just working on what I want when I want.
Yeah, definitely. Get to enjoy your time.
Yeah.
So looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently in your career?
Um. So I completely skipped college because I already knew how to do the job and I thought it was a faster way to town. To be honest, it probably actually made it take longer. So both for that and kind of, if I had to go, I think one of the questions you suggested is like, what advice would you give your younger self? And say, college is actually the shortcut, or was then. It's different now, but back in the 90s, in the late 90s and early 2000s, trying to get a job as a computer programmer without a college degree was hard.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the reason I ended up starting my own company, because trying to find someone else to hire me was hard. But starting my own company and selling my services as an independent computer consultant was easy. No one asks for your resume or credentials. You have a website, you have a business phone number, and a couple people in the local business community, and you can get hired for stuff. But getting a job is hard. So it's interesting how skipping college and becoming an entrepreneur and starting my own business kind of went hand in hand. And it's been a hard journey. It's required a lot of work. And, I don't think I've worked a 40-hour work week since I was a teenager delivering pizzas. But it's I don't know that I would necessarily do it different. But that was something that didn't work out the way I expected.
Yeah. On that note of school, in your, in your career, have you found yourself going back to school for anything or any sort of certifications at all?
No, I don't really put stock in much in the way of certifications. I'm constantly learning. I am educating myself on new tech, new industry trends. So I'm constantly paying attention to this and I'm constantly learning. I make it a point to try and, stay a step ahead of my team as far as being on the forefront of technology, and definitely want to stay a step ahead of our customers. That's what they pay us for. Um, but I don't put a lot of stock in certifications. Like I said, I never went to college. I never had even like an A+ certification. So formal education or someone else's credentials have never meant much to me. I've never cared what someone's education was on a resume when someone's applied. I'm a lot more interested in relevant work experience. So I either hire a seasoned professional or an enthusiastic amateur, and if they know how to do the job and they have the proper enthusiasm for it, certifications don't really mean much. And that's in some fields it matters. Like a CPA, I hire a CPA as my accountant because accounting doesn't change that frequently and that fast. Technology changes too quickly for so certifications like what you're going for, right? A program in cybersecurity, it will help open the door to get the job once you have that, right? I wouldn't discourage anyone from that. Like I said, I found it very hard to get a job as a computer programmer or as an IT professional without a degree because I didn't have the work experience yet, right? Now nobody cares, right? I can talk about work experience. I can talk about building one of the largest vertical market CRMs in North America. I can talk about doing PCI certifications and SOC 2 certifications and getting perfect reports from companies that never give perfect reports. And so other kinds of certifications. Um, no, but the classes, the learning, yes. So, like, I do a lot of Udemy classes. I find those extremely useful. I don't care about the little certificate they give me at the end.
Yeah, more about
I want
the
the
actual
information. I
learning.
want the
Yeah,
knowledge. But I want the
absolutely.
knowledge for myself, not to prove to someone else.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what does a typical day look like for you as a chief technology or privacy officer, as your title fits it?
So generally up early, usually at my desk by about 7 a.m. because stuff from East Coast clients starts rolling in. Usually I'm already sitting on half a dozen emails by 7 a.m. And uh, client phone calls, emails. I mean, as a CTO, I still will. I'll do a little bit directly in the tech, but most of what I do is just talking on the phone. I'm coordinating with. I'm talking to customers generally. Um, Large customers have their own IT team, so I'll talk and work directly with them. I coordinate, in Mivation, I oversee both because we're a SaaS software company. I oversee both information technology, security, and product development. So it's a pretty big role. But I have a really, really good team, and I firmly believe in empowering my people. If I can't empower someone to do the job when I'm not looking, then I don't have the right person. So they have my team has a lot of autonomy to make decisions and to get the job done. So generally, what I'm doing is not necessarily having to manage and oversee them so much as just be a backstop for them when they need executive support on a decision or when they want a second opinion or occasionally as a technical architect. And then sometimes I'll still roll up my sleeves and code. That's usually late at night. So that's what I do all day. I talk on the phone. I work with my team. I manage schedules. I coordinate with customers. I help coordinate between sales, support, and engineering to make sure everyone's seeing what they need and getting what they want. And then sometimes late at night, I'll decide to head back into my office, after my family goes to bed, and I'll actually roll up my sleeves and code. I'll work with the dev team and I'll go try to solve complex problems. And that's when I have fun. That's when I do kind of skunk works R&D, and I I sometimes build some of our next gen stuff, or at least I build the prototypes for it.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's awesome. It sounds like you have a very dynamic role, so it's cool that you kind
Yeah,
of
it's mostly
shift from
talking on the
one to the
phone for a
other.
living, but
Okay.
sometimes late at night, I actually get to pretend to be a coder.
There you go. And what are some like the biggest challenges that you faced in your current role? It sounds like you have a pretty good team, but I'm sure there's something that's, challenged you here or there.
Well, so things are constantly on the move, right? You can't stop learning. You
Yeah.
can't, technology changes fast. The security landscape changes fast. Things thought to be unhackable all of a sudden become quite hackable, right? Even external expectations change and security best practices change. A few years ago, an 8-character password, you were doing good. Now, if you allow passwords less than 14 characters, what's wrong with you? Do you even care about security? Right? Everyone has to use multi-factor authentication for everything, and even 2 isn't enough anymore. Now you need to put in a password, put your fingerprint, get your eye scanned,
Yep.
and use an app, right? To check your email. And that's just because it's what people expect. So, on that road, especially in the information security and privacy aspect, some of the challenge comes from misconceptions. Sometimes you have people with an undue amount of influence. Sometimes they're clients, sometimes they're setting standards that don't actually understand what they're talking about. A very good example that you'll run into is the concept of BYOK, or bring your own key. You want to have all the data encrypted in the cloud. They want to make sure you bring your own security keys so the cloud provider doesn't have the keys to your data. The problem is people who insist on that have no idea what they're actually talking about. Because if you don't give your application, if your application and your database are in the cloud, and you don't give your application the keys, meaning putting those up in the cloud, it can't read the data. So the
Yeah.
cloud provider has access anyway. They just have one more hurdle to jump through. Well, a bad actor or a nefarious engineer or security person at a cloud provider is going to jump through that extra hoop. So all you're really doing is making your own life a lot more complicated and taking work on your own team that the cloud provider would have happily done for you for what you're already paying them. Right.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes those misconceptions in security, driven by large enterprises that are used to doing things old ways, will sometimes create really bad best practices. Um, and I make it a point to understand the nuts and bolts of how things actually work. And so that's one of the frustrations. That's one challenge. The other one I'll tell you that I'm running into right now is people have very unrealistic expectations of AI technology. Um, like when you explain to people that AIs will hallucinate, they're like, well, how is that possible? Is the AI on drugs? Say, well, kind of. I mean, bad data is basically drugs to an AI, right? It's a hallucinogen. They're
Yeah.
only as smart as the data you give them. And even when you give them all good data, there's an element of randomness. That's how they fake being people so well. You
That's
know,
true.
AIs aren't actually smart. They don't actually think. They're just very, very good at role playing and faking it, right? And I mean LLM based AIs, not old school machine learning, modern LLMs, but they are very, very good at solving logical problems based on prior or existing science. So they're getting very good at coding. So, constantly being asked, well, do we actually need developers anymore? Can't we cut the dev team in half and let AI write half the code? Do we actually need security analysts anymore? Aren't there AI tools that will do all this now? And say, not well. Some things, yes. Some things, no. AIs are writing a surprising amount of code right now very well, but you still need a human to double check their work because they make mistakes, right? AIs will do a really good job at scanning your application for vulnerabilities, but they don't invent new hacks. Human security researchers do. AIs don't invent things. They're very good at regurgitating things and combining concepts, but they don't imagine new things. So,
Yeah.
like I said, unrealistic expectations of AI, and then just things constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly evolving.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you talked about the AI part of it, just because I hear a lot of students, even now that I'm with, they talk about, well, what are we learning some of this for? It's not like AI can't do it for us. But like you said, you really need that human factor in there. So,
And here's what it is right now, as far as just purely, let's talk about programmers. AI is absolutely as good and can do the job of a junior developer, can do most of their work very well. So a mid-level developer and, you know, $40 a month worth of AI tools will make them just as effective as a mid-level and a junior. So, but the thing is, if nobody hires junior developers, there won't be a next generation of senior developers,
sure.
right? So as business leaders, we all have to keep this in mind. And so you've got, companies like Shopify and Adobe are saying, we're not going to hire juniors anymore, right? We need to do all this stuff with AI. Don't hire people until you've proven that AI can't do the job. And I understand the short-term perspective of that, but that's a very short-sighted view. Because if too many companies do that, if we as a community, as an industry, decide that we're going to have AI do all the entry-level tasks, that's great for our bottom line today. But what happens when that causes a massive shrinking in the workforce of the mid and senior engineers we need in the future? Someone's got to vibe code with the prompt. Someone has to double check the AI's work. Someone has to respond to the production issues midday, right? That involve just knowing how the system works and being able to put pieces together that an AI's, at least the current generation of AI, has no hope on. And I don't think the next generation or two will either. So, it's kind of a very short-sighted view, and the natural result of this is going to be across the tech sector. I mean, Microsoft just laid off between 6 and 10,000 people. Google just laid off 3,000 engineers just on the West Coast, right? And because they're finding AI is making their people more efficient, that's great. But when you do that, we're going to cut the labor pool drastically. And it's not that there won't be engineers, but what we're going to find is that we're going to have to pay 3 times as much for senior engineers because the demand for them will be so high because there will be so few, right?
Yeah.
Or there just won't be enough to fill the jobs. And this has been a problem in the American tech sector, especially if you want people here in the States, is what leads most of us to hire offshore engineers. They're actually, it's not that we're trying to go cheap for the last 10 years, it's that there literally aren't enough people looking for jobs in the US with the skills. Right. That's why I was so excited when you said you're going into cybersecurity. It's an area where companies are constantly hiring, and there's a constant demand, and there literally are not enough qualified candidates to fill the jobs.
Definitely. Well, I do know that I have quite a few people in my class and we're all excited to get going. So,
Great.
okay. So,
Sorry,
how
I got
do
us off topic there.
no,
I'll step down off my soapbox
no, you are
of
totally
where
good.
these challenges and opportunities in the industry
Yeah.
right now are leading to some, in my opinion, some short-sighted decisions that are going to bite all of us tech executives firmly in the butt in
Oh,
about a
yeah.
decade when
Oh,
there's
yeah.
not enough people to do the jobs we need because we didn't want to hire any new entry level people and teach them how to do it because AI was cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't quite think of it in that sort of depth, but no, you're 100% right. And hopefully they can realize that before, there's not that pooling that they need to be able to pick from.
Yeah, I mean, look, if Microsoft and Google and Meta and Amazon decide they want to do everything with AI, great. Less competition for good engineers. I'm happy to hire them, right?
Yeah, definitely. So how do you personally stay current with the new technology and industry developments? Is there particular, things that you look at that you would say that students should be looking at too, or
So I first of all, I taught myself to program out of books. Now, granted, this was back in the late 80s and early 90s, right? I mean, it was like when I would actually have to physically go to a bookstore and talk my parents into buying me a book because this was like pre-internet, pre-AOL days. So I've learned out of books forever. So I I read a lot of books. If I want to learn a new programming language, I just buy a book on it.
okay.
I found Udemy. Online Udemy classes are a fantastic resource, and
Okay.
they're always on sale. You find a Udemy class that's 120 bucks, give it a week, it'll be $15. Right? They're always running like 80% off sales if you're just willing to wait a little bit. Honestly, there's even great like YouTube tutorials, right? If you want to, you want to learn something like the JavaScript programming language, learn like JavaScript zero to hero in 3 hours. I mean, I think if you search for that on YouTube, you'll find it. And it's like 3 hours to learn the whole programming language. And so now that assumes you already have basic fundamental understandings of programming. But same thing, like with, computer skills and security. Books are great resources, right? Things like Udemy, there's lots of them. There is tons of free and low cost learning out there. And I have nothing against university education, colleges and technical schools. But there's so much. If you're motivated on your own, if you don't need someone else pushing you, if you can find the intrinsic internal motivation to learn something just because you want the knowledge, right? Not because you need a certification or because you need to pass a course or you need a credential. If you want to learn just because you want the knowledge, there is lots of free and low cost information out there, and there are great resources. And so that's what I do. I'm reading constantly. I probably buy a Udemy course on some topic I want to learn once a week. One, I want to support these cool content creators that are creating these courses. And I want the knowledge. And even if it's a skill I don't see myself using. A couple of years ago, while I was on a long flight from Seattle to London, I decided I wanted to learn the Scala programming language and how to deal with Apache Spark and data analysis clusters. I've never used the skill, but I had 8 hours to kill on an airplane. Might as well learn
Yeah,
something. So I
definitely.
learned it. I haven't used it, but I learned it.
Yeah, I'm leaving out the country here in 6 days. Maybe I'll take that 6 hour flight to do something similar.
How are you going?
Heading out to Mexico for a much needed vacation.
It's a great way to kill time on a 6 hour flight,
It
right?
is,
You
yeah.
got something like an iPad, just go to Udemy, find a course, download the course, put in your headphones, and just sit there watching it on and just learn something.
Yeah, absolutely. Might have to do that.
And
Uh,
I mean, stuff like that. They have course on everything. Computers and tech is a major area. If you want to learn basic carpentry or how to bake better cookies, they're
oh yeah.
everything.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
I've bought courses on plumbing and baking better cookies.
So this website that you're speaking of, I have never heard of it. So
Udemy, Udemy.
okay. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna
It's
definitely
just an
go check that
online
out.
learning platform, and people go create these classes, and then there's a rating system, and they create these
Oh,
classes, and they're all video and tutorials, and you just listen or watch, and you learn whatever it is. Just about anything you'd want to learn, you can find there.
wow. Okay. Okay.
Again, it's just one example. It's one I use, but there's lots of examples. Kindle books are another one that I do a lot,
Yeah.
right? Especially for things like technical books, they change so often. I don't need the paper books sitting around, and technical books tend to be thick,
Oh yeah.
right? So I'll often just go. I'll just download a Kindle book and just read it on my Kindle.
Nice. So what skills do you think are most important for someone entering the cybersecurity field today are?
Okay, so first thing, you have to understand fundamentals of networking. A lot of hacks start at the network. So learn TCP networking. You don't have to be a network engineer, but understand how it works. Understand what all those weird numbers mean. There's a lot of hacks that can be done with those weird numbers. Okay. Um, so understand the fundamentals of networking. That's where a lot of hacks start. Second, understand operating systems, right? That's also where a lot of hacks and a lot of security come from, locking down the operating system. Most businesses use Windows, so if you're going to pick one, learn Windows, right? But if you're going to be focusing on server side, that's if you want to be, if you want to focus on cyber security for the desktop, right? But if you're focused on cybersecurity on the back end of the server, Linux has won the server war. Windows Server does
Yeah.
still exist. Apple Server, Mac Server is kind of out there, but it's more just like, photography studios might use a Mac file server. I mean, it's not, they're not even trying, they don't even take themselves seriously, right? Apple runs Unix and Linux servers. So, learning Linux is great for if you want to do server side stuff. If you learn Windows and Linux, and the nice thing is Macs under the scenes are built off BSD, which is virtually Linux anyway. It's a different flavor of Unix. So understanding networking, understanding operating systems, are two key things. The other thing you have to understand in cybersecurity is human psychology. So a psychology class, especially psychology around deception, right? Um, Learn to lie, because that's how most hacking is actually social engineering. So if you're, I mean, I don't want to say be a deceitful person, but you have to be able to think like a deceitful person, right? Because that's who you're fighting against, are hackers. And hackers, I mean, Kevin Mitnick, who's one of the most successful hackers of all time. Fascinating story to read and research this guy. I'm sure in cybersecurity classes they probably tell his story,
They
right? And
do.
all he would do is pick up the phone and literally talk people into giving him access. Back in the day, it was phone numbers and access codes and stuff, because they figured, well, if you don't know the phone number to dial in, that's enough security, right? That's basically a password. Who's going to know that phone number? So he'd call and just pretend to be the guy trying to fix the problem. And, I'll tell you, I did a penetration test, security test of a data center once, and I managed to get through into their most secure part of their data center. How? Well, it was simple. There was some construction going on. And so all I did was pick up a ladder and stand outside that secure door, waiting for someone to come out the door. And people, being the kind, trusting, generally helpful sort that most are, held the door for the guy carrying the ladder
Yep.
and let me walk right in past the fingerprint and pin pad sensors, right into the secure part of the data center that I wasn't supposed to have access to. And so when I went up to the room and said, hey, you might want to check your security cams, they just looked and their security guy just face palmed, right? Because it was literally just another customer so kindly held the door for me, right? So think like a liar, think like a deceitful person, always think, how would I hack this, right? I can tell you an interesting story about when we first acquired Racing Snail. An old version of the software had a critical security flaw in it that I did the security assessment of it. And I sat down with the programmer at that time who had built it, and I showed him how logging in as any one of his customers, I could access any of his other and all of his other customers' data in any way I wanted by simply manipulating the traffic between the UI and the backend, because the backend was trusting the UI to ensure security that it shouldn't have trusted. And so by me manipulating those, I was able to do it. And I immediately decided that not only did I not have a problem with this programmer who had made such a critical security vulnerability, but I actually really liked the guy and still work with him this day because he didn't take offense to it. He was not offended. He did not get defensive. He watched me completely hack the crap out of his software and said, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Show me how you did that and how do I stop that? And it was
Yeah.
like, okay, we're going to be friends. I like you. So, but that was it. Like, I had to think like the bad guy. How would I, as a bad actor, hack this? And I found the issue. And it was a really simple thing to fix for
Is it like a
him.
buffer overflow situation?
No, a buffer overflow is something I've demonstrated before. No, what it was is the account ID, right? That the
Okay.
backend used to filter the access was actually maintained in the state at the UI and was sent with every API call to the
Oh.
backend. And so the backend didn't verify the account ID against the logged in security token. It would
Oh.
just accept it. And so all he had to do is put a little bit of middleware in place that on every call to the API verified that security token against the account ID, and it completely stopped the problem. It took him an afternoon to completely neuter that vulnerability and stop that hack dead.
Wow.
Um, but he never imagined that someone would intercept the API calls between the UI and the backend and just swap out the account ID.
And that's why it pays to have a good penetration tester to check these things.
That's why it pays to have it. Yes, and a penetration tester is a very useful resource. So these are important skills, right? Being able to think like a bad guy.
Yeah.
If you're going to be in cybersecurity, you need to go into look at every system like I'm a bad guy and I want to hack this. How do I hack it? Now, how do I stop myself? What would make that harder for me? The other thing is understand that no defense is impenetrable. It's not an if, but a when,
Yeah.
right? And so it's all about layers. I'm sure they've been teaching you. It's all about layers of security. Stopping a hacker cold is not possible with a sufficiently determined attacker, right? It's what you need to do is slow them down and build it. So it's intrusion. You hear the concepts of IPS and IDS, and they're not interchangeable terms. They're intrusion prevention systems and intrusion detection systems. Okay. Prevention systems ideally stop, but for the most part, slow hackers, right? Intrusion detection systems detect attempts or successful intrusions, right? And you need both, because no matter how good your prevention is, there's always somebody better, or there's always just some new 0-day exploit that you haven't gotten around to patching yet, or that you haven't even heard about yet because it hasn't popped up on your news feed, but the guy who found the exploit is currently hacking you, right? There's always somebody better. So that's where the detection comes into play. So it's just to slow them down and mire them in layers long enough that the perimeter alarms are going off and you can detect it. And worst case, go unplug the network cable from the system they're trying to hack,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So
The other
I do
thing
have
I
a
would
quick
tell you, just a
question
little
for
piece of
you.
advice, don't ever underestimate the value of air gapping a system. If you have
Okay.
something that is truly so critical you cannot afford a hacker to get into it, take it off the internet. Can you just have that system be offline, right? Can this be an offline desktop in a locked room with no internet connection that is shut down unless you actually need that, right?
Yeah.
Can it be burned on an optical disc and put in a safe, right? You know, sometimes an air gap. So a really good example, a lot of enterprise systems are built on concepts of trusts, right? And certificate chains, right? So
Yeah.
your root certificate that issues your intermediate certificates, the one the entire chain is based on, put that on an offline system, right? Or keep that on a thumb drive locked in a vault somewhere. There is no reason, this is why intermediate trust exists. There's no reason for that root to be online. It's only needed to issue new intermediates that should be good for a couple of years. So put it on a laptop locked in a safe and only boot the laptop up once every year or two when you need to use it, and then shut it back down and put it away. So,
Yeah.
again, enterprise trust is all about that. So it's just those are the skills. Those are kind of the piece that tell you everything is hackable. Everything is hackable. Also, just be prepared to answer stupid questions, right? I mean, look, your technical executives, myself included, will sometimes read a trade magazine and think we know more than we do. And sometimes you have business executives in technical companies that sometimes get led astray by LinkedIn posts and will just ask, like, hey, aren't there AI tools that can do all this? Do we really need to pay for a human penetration tester? Yes, there are absolutely AI penetration scanning tools, and they're a great tool to have in your toolbox, in addition to paying a professional to do it for you once a year.
Yeah. On the note of penetration testing, that's something that's really intrigued me, and I've taken a class that was just all about that. And now that you said that you've done some penetration testing, why it was did you thoroughly enjoy that? Is that something you still
Oh, but
do?
it's
Did you
fun. Oh,
is
being a
that
black hat is so much fun. Well,
yeah,
actually, being a white hat, being a black hat, being a real black hat, you risk going to jail. Being a white hat hacker is so much fun. I did it for a few years, and I did it for several vendors that we used to hire. I hacked our data center, including using a Slim Jim to pop the lock on one of their cages and get in. Right? I mean, Slim Jim bought on Amazon. Pop, open the cage. Don't need a key card, right? Simple latch mechanism. If you can slide something in there, you can pop it open, right? I mean, sometimes a hack is mechanical, right? Um, right? I mean, even down to things like, it's the law. No matter how secure any facility is, you can't lock people in. So if the fire alarm goes off, all the exit doors have to open.
yeah,
You can't lock people in. It's a life safety issue. It's okay if the computer's burned down, not people, right? So if you can trick the system that's tied into the fire suppression or the fire alarms, um, you can get all
you
the
got some
locks to
easy
open.
access. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even other things like that, like buffer overruns, right? Showing people that you can hack their software is, oh man, penetration testing and hacking, showing privilege escalation attacks. So much fun. I did I was invited to speak at a symposium, at an IT symposium at a University Technica de Cluj, which is a big technical university in Cluj-Napoca, Romania.
Oh,
And
wow.
I gave a talk called An Hour of Anti-Patterns, 10 routines guaranteed to get you fired as a programmer, right? And one of the ones that I demonstrated was use of antiquated encryption and hashing algorithms. And so what I did is I took a file of 25,000 credit card numbers with their 4-digit pins, right? This is all about weak security, 4-digit pins, and I used MD5 hashing for those pins to protect them, right? MD5 was used for password hashing for decades,
Yeah.
but it's broken now, right? And so I then showed the students, I don't know, something like 200 lines of C code that, again, I wrote while in the air over Greenland on my way there for this talk, um, that created a basic rainbow table. And I said, okay, I had a basic laptop at the time. I'm like, how long do you think it's going to take? And I let them guess how long it was going to take. I said, ready? And I hit enter to run the program to decrypt that file. And the screen blinked and like, oh, your code crashed. I'm like, nope. It took less than 1 second to decrypt, to literally reverse the MD5 hashing on 25,000 4-digit pins. And I
Wow.
showed them and I opened the output file. I'm like, the code didn't crash. It took less than 1 second to do that on a laptop, because
Wow.
these are antiquated security mechanisms, and a rainbow table with 128-bit MD5s of every possible combination of a 4-digit numeric pin only takes a couple megs of RAM.
Wow. That's insane.
To put it in a little binary tree in a rainbow table, right? And a
Yeah.
binary search, you're only talking about 10,000 possible combinations. So a binary search on 10,000 entries only takes 5 or 6 clock cycles, on average. It's pretty straightforward.
So we
So,
are, we only have a couple minutes
oh,
left
yeah,
here
sorry, go
because
ahead.
oh no,
Go
you're
ahead.
good. Zoom just decided that it only gives a 40-minute limit
All
now
right,
unless
well, let's
you
move
upgrade.
quick through the
So,
rest. I get off topic.
so
But yes, being a
no,
white
you are
hat is
all
fun.
good.
If you get a chance to do pen testing, do it. It's
Yeah,
lots of fun.
that's definitely an area I wanna go more into. So what's one piece of advice that you give someone just starting in their cybersecurity journey like me and my cohorts?
Just constantly be learning. Keep your eyes open, constantly be learning. Do not underestimate, and I tell anyone going into tech this, do not underestimate how disruptful generative AI is, right? I mean, no matter how disruptive you think it is the industry now, it's only going to get more disruptive. So, but don't resist it. Don't try to play on the other side. You can't win this fight. This is not a splash. This is a tidal wave. Ride it, right?
Okay.
Learn to use, embrace it, become an expert in the use of AI tools, and be a 10x producer. Do the work that it would have taken 10 people to do years ago because you embrace the use of AI tech, right? You will
Okay.
find yourself in extraordinarily high demand if you understand the tools, understand the state of the art, and embrace the AI tech to just become, a 10x analyst, right? Everyone wants that kind of person because honestly, people don't want to go prompt in AI for things. Executives don't. They really just want someone else to do it for them, and they're willing to hire for that. They just don't want to hire a whole department when they could hire 1 or 2 people.
Yeah. Okay. Was there anything I haven't asked you that you think would be helpful for me to know as an up and coming cybersecurity professional?
Um, no, no, your questions have covered most of it, and some of the things that I would have wanted to share, I got off topic and shared anyway, other than a couple of amusing anecdotes.
Nope, that's awesome. Well, hey, I know that this is going to cut us off in just a minute, so my apologies. But I really appreciate your time, Kelly. This has been awesome. It's been eye-opening, and you've given me so much good advice, so much to think about. And I don't know if it's okay with you if you want me to share this with my class. The submission is just supposed to go to my teacher, but if you want it to be available to other students,
Use
I'm
your
allowed to make.
discretion. I mean, if it just goes to your teacher, fine. If you want to take any clips of this and share it with your class or any of the knowledge, by all means do. You're
Okay,
welcome to share any of it.
okay, perfect. I just wanted your permission, make sure that's okay with you. And
Sure.
again, I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the future, it sounds like.
All right. Bye, Sarah. Have a great
All
weekend.
right. Yeah, thank you. You too, Kelly.
Bye.